Ambassador Kira stood at the tall window of the council chamber and watched the orange sky turn black with smoke. In the distance, she could see the bright flashes of explosions as the last defense stations fell one by one. Her people had built those stations for protection against asteroids, not against an enemy that ate planets for food. Behind her, the High Council sat in silence. 12 leaders of the most peaceful civilization in the known galaxy, and not one of them knew what to do. They had never needed to know. For 10,000 years, the Volani had lived in peace. They traded goods and knowledge with other species. They built beautiful cities and created wonderful art. They had forgotten how to fight because they never needed to remember. Now that forgetting would kill them all. High Counselor Muva broke the silence with her tired voice. She was old, even by Volani standards, and her 4 eyes had seen many things in her long life. But she had never seen anything like the Drath Swarm. 17 systems, she said slowly. 17 systems gone in 6 cycles. Billions of our people, eaten alive, were scattered as refugees. And now they come here, to our homeworld. How long do we have? Asked Counselor Tev, the youngest member of the council. 3 days, Kira answered without turning from the window. Maybe 4 if we are lucky. But luck has not been kind to us. The Drath Swarm was not like other threats the galaxy had faced. They were not conquerors who wanted land or resources. They were not enemies who could be reasoned with or paid to leave. The Drath were hunger given form. They were billions of creatures that moved through space like a cloud of locusts, consuming everything in their path. Planets, ships, space stations, people. Nothing was too small or too large for them to eat. Other civilizations had tried to stop them. The mighty Karth Empire had sent their greatest fleet against the Swarm 50 years ago. The Swarm had eaten every ship and then eaten the Korath homeworld for dessert. The ancient Marth Collective had tried to negotiate, to offer tribute. The Swarm did not understand negotiation. They only understood eating. We must evacuate, said Counselor Bren. Save as many as we can and run. Run where? Muva asked. The Swarm follows wherever there is life. They will chase us across the galaxy until there are none of us left. Kira finally turned from the window. Her purple skin was pale with exhaustion, and her hands shook slightly as she spoke. There must be someone who can help us. Someone in the galaxy who has the power to fight. Everyone who had such power is already dead or hiding, Tev said bitterly. The Korath are gone. The Morith have sealed their borders. The Shindi refuse to answer our calls. We are alone. What about the archives? Kira asked suddenly. The ancient archives contain records of every species ever discovered. Perhaps there is someone we have overlooked. Someone we never contacted. Muva shook her head slowly. The archives contain only primitives and isolationists. Species too young or too dangerous to approach. None of them could possibly help us. Dangerous. Kira repeated the word. Perhaps dangerous is exactly what we need right now. The idea was crazy. Everyone in the room knew it was crazy. But crazy was all they had left. Within the hour, Kira stood in the great archive hall with a team of researchers. The hall contained millions of records dating back thousands of years. Every species the Volani had ever discovered was cataloged here, along with detailed notes about their technology, culture, and potential threat level. Search for species with high aggression ratings, Kira ordered. Find anyone who knows how to fight. The researchers worked through the night. They found many aggressive species, but most were already dead, destroyed by their own violence or consumed by the swarm. Others were too primitive to help, still using simple tools and unable to leave their own planets. Then, just as the second sun began to rise, a young researcher named Dara found something interesting. Ambassador, she called out. I found something strange. Species 7742, from a planet called Earth. Kira hurried over to look at the file. The record was old, nearly 200 cycles outdated. It showed a small blue planet in an isolated arm of the galaxy, far from the main trade routes and civilization centers. "They are primitive," Dara said, scrolling through the information. "When we last observed them, they had barely developed space travel. They could not even leave their own star system. Then why do you call them strange?" Dara pointed to a section of the file marked with red warning symbols. "Look at their history. They have fought over 200 major wars in just the last 1,000 cycles. They have killed millions of their own kind over land, resources, religion, and ideas. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and they built thousands of them." Kira felt a chill run down her spine. "They fight each other? Their own species? Constantly. The observation team that studied them called them the most violent species ever discovered. They recommended no contact under any circumstances." For a long moment, Kira stared at the images of Earth. It was such a small, beautiful planet. Blue oceans and green land and white clouds. It was hard to believe that such a lovely world had produced monsters. But then again, the Villani did not need friendly neighbors right now. They needed monsters. "Send them a message," Kira said finally. Dara looked at her with shock. "Ambassador, the protocols forbid contact with dangerous primitives. The Council would never approve." "The Council is preparing to watch our people die," Kira replied coldly. "I am preparing to save them. Send the message. Tell them everything. Tell them about the swarm, about our people, about the worlds that have been lost. Tell them we need help. And if they do not answer, or if they come to harm us instead of help us..." Kira looked at the window, where the dark clouds of war were gathering on the horizon. "Then we will be no worse off than we already are. At least we will have tried." The signal was sent that night. It traveled across the vast emptiness of space at the speed of light, carrying the desperate hope of a dying civilization. Kira did not expect an answer. She did not believe in miracles. She simply believed in doing something, anything, rather than waiting quietly for death. 3 days passed. The swarm drew closer. The evacuation ships began loading refugees, though everyone knew there were not enough ships for everyone. Then, on the 4th day, something impossible happened. Something answered. Admiral James Park had served in the United Earth Fleet for 32 years. He had seen many strange things in that time. He had watched humanity build its first colony on Mars. He had commanded the expedition that reached the edge of the solar system. He had helped design the fold space engines that finally allowed humans to travel faster than light. But he had never seen anything like the message that appeared on his screen that morning. Park sat in his office aboard the USS Constellation, the flagship of Earth's Third Fleet. Outside his window, 17 warships floated in formation around the orbital station. These were the finest vessels humanity had ever built, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city and enough crew to populate a small town. They had been built for war. Humanity had always expected to fight someone someday, whether alien invaders or each other. But for the past 50 years, there had been no war. The United Earth government had brought peace to the planet, and the fleet had become more of a symbol than a weapon. Now, staring at the alien message on his screen, Park wondered if their luck had finally run out. "It's real," said Lieutenant Emma Cole, his communications officer. She was young, barely 30, but she was the best codebreaker in the fleet. "I run every test I can think of. This is not a hoax or a simulation. This is a genuine extraterrestrial transmission." "And you're certain about the translation?" Park asked. The message included a translation key, They wanted us to understand them. Cole pulled up the message on the main screen. They call themselves the Villani. They say they are a peaceful species that has been attacked by something called the Drath Swarm. They say billions of their people have already died, and billions more will die soon. They are asking for military help. Captain David Kim, Park's second-in-command, leaned forward in his chair. He was a careful man who never made quick decisions. How did they even know we exist? We've never sent signals that far into space. According to the message, they observed our planet about 200 years ago, Cole explained. They decided not to contact us because we were too primitive and too violent. But now they want our violence, Park said quietly. Yes, sir. They specifically asked for military assistance. They say they have no weapons, no soldiers, no way to fight back. The room fell silent as everyone considered what this meant. First contact with an alien civilization. Proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. And the first thing the aliens wanted was for humans to come and kill something for them. Park stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the constellation's massive hull gleamed in the sunlight. She was a beautiful ship, nearly a kilometer long, with enough weapons to crack a moon in half. Park had hoped he would never have to use those weapons. How far away are they? He asked. 4 months at maximum burn using the fold space engines, Cole answered. But sir, we don't know anything about these aliens. We don't know if the message is real. This could be a trap. Or it could be someone who genuinely needs our help, Park replied. Kim spoke up carefully. Admiral, even if the message is real, this isn't our fight. We have no treaty with these Villani. No obligation to them. Sending the fleet into unknown space against an unknown enemy would be incredibly dangerous. I know. We could lose ships. We could lose people. And for what? For strangers we've never met. Park turned to face his officers. He was not a tall man, but there was something about him that made people listen when he spoke. Maybe it was his eyes, which had seen too much war in the history books and never wanted to see it in person. Or maybe it was his voice, calm and steady, even when the world was falling apart. Let me tell you a story, he said. When I was a boy, my grandfather told me about something that happened during the Great Wars of the 20th century. A ship full of refugees was sinking in the ocean. They were strangers from a foreign land, people most Americans had never met and would never meet. But a nearby ship received their distress call and went to help them. They saved over 1,000 lives that day. He paused. My grandfather asked me, why did they do it? They had no obligation, no treaty, no benefit. They risked their own lives for complete strangers. And what did you tell him? Cole asked. I told him it was because that's what humans do. When someone calls for help, we answer. It's the only thing that makes us more than just clever animals. It's the only thing that makes us human. The room was very quiet. I'm not ordering anyone to come with me, Park continued. This is a volunteer mission only. But I'm going. I'm taking the Constellation to answer that call. Anyone who wants to join me is welcome. Kim was silent for a long moment. Then he stood up and saluted. The Defiance will follow wherever you lead, Admiral. One by one, the other officers in the room rose to their feet. Cole, Lieutenant Kevin West, the fighter pilot commander. Commander Lisa Brown, Chief of the Carrier Group. Captain Rachel Stone, the youngest destroyer captain in the fleet. Within an hour, the word had spread through all 17 ships. Not a single crew member refused to go. Some of them were scared. All of them were uncertain. But every single one of them answered the call. That night, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Constellation as the fleet prepared for fold space jump. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, checking systems and running calculations. They were professionals, the best humanity had to offer. All ships report ready, Admiral, Cole announced. Park nodded. He looked out the main viewport at the blue marble of Earth, hanging in the darkness of space. He wondered if he would ever see it again. "Send a message to Fleet Command," he said. "Tell them where we're going and why. Tell them we'll be back when the job is done." "And if they order us to return?" Park smiled slightly. "Then I suppose I'll have to apologize when we get home." "Jump when ready, Lieutenant." The Fold Space engines hummed to life. Reality twisted around the fleet like water going down a drain. And then, in a flash of light, 17 human warships disappeared. From Earth's orbit, they were heading toward the unknown. They were heading toward war. They were heading to answer a stranger's call for help, because that was what humans did. Ambassador Kira had given up hope 3 days ago. The evacuation was not going well. There were simply too many people and not enough ships. Mothers clutched their children in endless lines at the spaceports. Old people sat quietly in their homes, accepting that there was no room for them on the escape vessels. The lucky ones would flee to distant colonies and try to rebuild. The unlucky ones would stay behind and become food for the swarm. Kira had chosen to stay. As ambassador, she felt it was her duty to remain with her people until the end. She spent her days helping with the evacuation and her nights staring at the stars, wondering if anyone had received their desperate message. No one had answered. She had not really expected them to. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. The sensor operator on duty nearly fell out of his chair when the alert sounded. At first, he thought it was a malfunction. Then he thought it was the swarm arriving early. What he saw on his screen made no sense at all. 17 ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. They had come out of fold space without warning, which should have been impossible. The Villani fold space technology required hours of careful calculation and precise navigation. These ships had simply appeared out of nothing, and they were heading directly for Velen Prime at incredible speed. Kira was summoned to the communications center within minutes. By the time she arrived, the entire High Council was already there, staring at the display screens with wide eyes and open mouths. "What are they?" High Counselor Muva asked. Her voice was shaking. Kira studied the sensor data. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were angular and harsh, with sharp edges and thick armor plating. They had none of the elegant curves that most spacefaring species preferred. These ships looked like they had been designed for only one purpose: war. They matched no known configuration, the sensor operator reported. But based on their point of origin and their design characteristics, I believe these are the humans. The room went silent. Everyone remembered what the archives had said about humans. The most violent species ever discovered. 200 wars in 1,000 years. Weapons capable of destroying their own planet. And now 17 of their warships were heading straight toward them. "They're going to attack us," Counselor Tev whispered. "We invited monsters to our doorstep, and now they're going to kill us." "We don't know that," Kira said firmly. "We asked for help. Perhaps they have come to give it. Or perhaps they saw our weakness and decided to take what they wanted." Before anyone could argue further, the main communication screen flickered to life. A face appeared on the display. It was a strange face with only 2 eyes and pale pink skin and short dark hair. It looked almost childlike compared to the Villani, soft and unimpressive. But the eyes were not soft. The eyes were steel. "This is Admiral James Park of the United Earth Fleet," the human said. His voice was calm and controlled. "We received your distress signal. We are here to help." For a long moment, no one spoke. The Villani leaders stared at the human face on their screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. This small, fragile-looking creature had traveled across the galaxy with a fleet of warships to answer a stranger's call. Kira stepped forward. Her hearts were pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "I am Ambassador Kira of the Villani Collective. We did not expect anyone to come." "We almost didn't," Park admitted. "It's a long way from Earth, but we figured anyone desperate enough to call for help from complete strangers probably really needed it. We do. We need it more than you can possibly know." Park nodded. "Tell us about your enemy. Tell us everything." Over the next several hours, Kira explained the Drat Swarm to the humans. She told them about the billions of creatures that move through space like a living cloud. She told them about the worlds that have been consumed, stripped of every living thing down to the bacteria. She told them about the civilizations that had fallen, the species that had gone extinct, the endless hunger that could never be satisfied. She expected the humans to be frightened. The swarm had destroyed empires. They had eaten fleets that made the human vessels look like toys. Even the bravest warriors in the galaxy had learned to fear them, but Admiral Park did not look frightened. He looked thoughtful. "So they're basically space locusts," he said when she finished. "Big, hungry, and not very smart. They have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours," Kira replied. "Or yours, with respect. I don't doubt it. But we've dealt with locusts before. We've dealt with lots of things that tried to eat us. Wolves, tigers, sharks, diseases that killed millions. Our whole history is basically a long list of things that tried to eat us and failed." Park smiled slightly. "We're really good at making things go extinct." Captain Kim spoke up from behind him. "Admiral, the swarm will arrive in approximately 48 hours. We should begin planning our defense." "Agreed." Park turned back to the screen. "Ambassador Kira, I need to know everything about the swarm's behavior. How they attack, how they move, what hurts them. My tactical team will work with your scientists to develop a battle plan. You're really going to fight them?" Kira asked. "You've only seen images. You don't understand how many of them there are. I've seen the numbers. Billions of creatures. Enough to darken a planet." Park's expression did not change. "We've fought 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds before. Not always successfully, but we've fought them. And we've survived." I Counselor Muva stepped forward. Her voice was old and tired, but there was something new in it. Something that sounded almost like hope. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk your people for strangers you've never met? What do you gain from helping us?" Admiral Park considered the question for a moment. "Nothing," he said finally. "We gain nothing. That's not why we came." He paused. "We came because you asked. Because you needed help and we could give it. That's what humans do, Counselor. When someone calls for help, we answer. It doesn't matter if they're friends or strangers. It doesn't matter if we gain anything. We just answer." Kira felt tears forming in her eyes. In 10,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever said anything like that to her people. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had a price. But these strange, violent, primitive creatures from a tiny blue planet had crossed the galaxy for nothing but the chance to help. Perhaps they were monsters after all, but perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Captain Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the destroyer Defiance and watched them come. On her tactical display, the enemy appeared as a massive cloud of red dots, so many that they blurred together into a solid wall of color. Each dot was a living ship, a creature of teeth and hunger that had been born in the darkness. Between stars, there were billions of them. Stone had read the reports. She had studied the data, but nothing could have prepared her for actually seeing them. The swarm filled the entire sky like a plague of locusts descending on a field. They blotted out the stars with their numbers. "All ships, this is Admiral Park." The Admiral's voice came through the fleet communication channel, calm and steady as always. "The enemy is in range. You all know the plan. You all know the risks. Today we find out if humanity is ready for the galaxy. Make me proud. Fire at will. The Defiant shook as her main guns opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced across the void, cutting through the front lines of the swarm. Hundreds of creatures died in the first volley, their bodies exploding into clouds of frozen flesh and blood. But hundreds more took their place immediately, and thousands behind them, and millions behind those. Forward batteries, continuous fire, Stone ordered. Don't let them get close to our hull. Lieutenant Kevin West's voice crackled over the radio from his fighter. Red Squadron engaging. These things are ugly up close, Captain. Real ugly. Just keep them off our carriers, Lieutenant. Let the big guns do the heavy lifting. The battle had begun. On the Constellation's bridge, Admiral Park watched the tactical display with cold calculation. He had planned this battle down to the smallest detail, working with the Villani scientists to understand every weakness the swarm possessed. The creatures were fast but not very smart. They attacked in straight lines, drawn to the heat and energy of ships like moths to a flame. They had no tactics, no strategy, no commanders giving orders. They simply swarmed toward anything alive and tried to eat it. This made them predictable. And predictable enemies could be killed. Commander Brown, bring your carrier group around to bearing 270, Park ordered. I want a crossfire on their main concentration. Aye, Admiral. Moving into position now. Lisa Brown's carrier group swung wide around the battle, their hangar bays launching wave after wave of drone fighters. The drones were small, fast, and packed with antimatter explosives. They flew directly into the thickest parts of the swarm and detonated, creating massive holes in the enemy formation. Direct hits, the tactical officer reported. Enemy casualties in the millions. Keep firing. Don't give them time to reform. On the surface of Velen Prime, Ambassador Kira watched the battle through long-range sensors. She had seen many things in her life, but she had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like demons. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, each one covering the others while pouring fire into the swarm. Their fighters darted through enemy formations, too fast and too small for the creatures to catch. Their weapons burned hotter than stars, cutting through the swarm's biological armor like knives through paper. But it was not just their weapons that amazed her. It was their spirit. She watched as a human destroyer took a direct hit from a swarm creature, its hull torn open to the vacuum of space. Instead of retreating, the destroyer accelerated into the enemy, its guns firing until the very last moment. The crew knew they were going to die. They died fighting anyway. She watched as human pilots flew their damaged fighters directly into the mouths of swarm creatures, detonating their reactors at point-blank range. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation to protect their fellow pilots. She watched as human medics pulled wounded soldiers from burning wreckage, carrying them to safety even as more enemies attacked. They would not leave their people behind, not even the dead. They're insane, High Counselor Muva whispered beside her. They're completely insane. No, Kira said softly. They're not insane. They're just not afraid to die. They've always known they could die. They've been living with death their entire history. She paused. That's what makes them so dangerous. They fight like they have nothing to lose. The battle raged for 18 hours. The swarm threw everything they had at the human fleet. Wave after wave of creatures crashed against the defensive lines. For every 1,000 that died, 10,000 more took their place. The humans took damage. Ships burned. People died. But they did not break. Captain David Kim led a desperate charge into the heart of the swarm when the left flank began to collapse. His ship, the Valor, absorbed hit after hit as it drew the enemy's attention away from the damaged carriers. When the Valor finally exploded, Kim was still giving orders, still fighting until his last breath. Lieutenant West lost half his squadron protecting the evacuation ships. He flew on borrowed time with a damaged fighter and one working gun, taking down 17 more creatures before he was finally hit. His last words over the radio were, "Tell my mother I love her." Commander Brown's carrier took a direct hit that killed everyone on the bridge except her. Wounded and alone, she dragged herself to the auxiliary control station and continued commanding her ships. She refused to leave her post until every last fighter had returned safely. And through it all, Admiral Park stood on the Constellation's bridge like a statue made of stone. He gave orders with perfect calm. He made decisions that sent people to their deaths. He watched his friends and colleagues die on his tactical display, but he did not break. Finally, as the second sun began to set on Velen Prime, the swarm began to retreat. The creatures had never retreated before. In all their centuries of destruction, they had never encountered an enemy they could not consume. But they had never encountered humans before. The human fleet had killed billions of them. The human weapons had burned them by the millions. The human fighters had harried them without mercy. And most importantly, the humans had not given up. No matter how many creatures attacked, no matter how many ships burned, the humans kept fighting. They fought with a fury that the swarm did not understand. The creatures were hungry, but the humans were angry. And anger, it turned out, was stronger than hunger. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking with exhaustion and relief. "The enemy is breaking off. They're leaving the system." Park stared at the display for a long moment. The massive cloud of red dots was indeed shrinking, pulling away from Velen Prime and heading toward deep space. "Don't pursue," he ordered. "Let them go. We've done enough." Around him, his crew began to cheer. Some of them laughed. Others cried. After 18 hours of constant battle, they had won, but Park did not celebrate. He was looking at another display, one that showed the cost of their victory. 4 ships destroyed. 2,000 humans dead. Friends he would never see again. Young men and women who had followed him across the galaxy to help strangers they had never met. They had won. He hoped it was worth the price. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every major civilization heard the story within days. A primitive species from an isolated corner of the galaxy had answered a stranger's distress call. They had traveled 4 months across unknown space. They had fought the Drath Swarm, the same swarm that had destroyed the mighty Korath Empire, the same swarm that had made the ancient Morith hide behind their sealed borders. And they had one. Ambassador Kira stood before the Galactic Council for the first time in her life. The council chamber was a massive dome floating in neutral space, where representatives from 100 species gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. Kira had never been important enough to visit before. Now she was the most famous Velani in history. Admiral Park stood beside her, wearing his dress uniform. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and heavy thoughts. But he stood straight and tall, representing his species with quiet dignity. The council chamber was silent as the ancient Morith representative rose to speak. The Morith were among the oldest species in the galaxy, crystalline beings who had existed for millions of years. They had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched the swarm consume world after world. They had done nothing to help because they believed nothing could stop the swarm. Now they looked at the human admiral with something between confusion and fear. "We have reviewed the battle. Recordings," the Morith said. Its voice echoed through the chamber like wind through crystal caves. "We have analyzed your tactics and your weapons. We have studied your species' history, and we find ourselves deeply troubled." Park said nothing. He simply waited. "You are a violent people," the Morith continued. Your history is written in blood. You have killed more of your own kind than the swarm has killed in centuries. You developed weapons capable of destroying your own planet, and you built thousands of them. The crystal being paused. Why should we not fear you as much as we feared the swarm? It was a fair question. Every species in the chamber was thinking the same thing. The humans had proven they could fight. They had proven they could kill on a massive scale. What was to stop them from turning that power against the rest of the galaxy? Park took a deep breath before answering. "You're right," he said simply. "We are violent. We have killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas, over gods. We have done terrible things to each other. We are not proud of our history." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was not the answer anyone had expected. "But here's the thing about humans," Park continued. "We learn. We grow. We change. 1,000 years ago, we were killing each other with swords and arrows. 500 years ago, we were killing each other with guns and bombs. 100 years ago, we came close to destroying ourselves entirely." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But we didn't. We pulled back from the edge. We looked at what we had become, and we decided to be something different. We united our planet. We stopped fighting each other. We turned our weapons toward the stars, hoping we would never have to use them." The Morith leaned forward. "And yet, you came here with warships. You came ready to kill." "Yes, because killing is sometimes necessary. Because there are things in the universe that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with, cannot be paid to leave you alone." Park's voice hardened. "The swarm is one of those things. They understand only one language, and we spoke it fluently." Admiral Park stepped forward, facing the entire council. "You ask why you should not fear us. Here is my answer. You should fear us. We are capable of terrible destruction. We have proven that many times throughout our history." He paused. "But we are also capable of something else. Something that the swarm and every other pure predator in the universe will never understand." "What is that?" the Morith asked. "Compassion." The word hung in the air like a bell that had been struck. "We came here because the Villani asked for help. We had no treaty with them. No obligation. No benefit. We came because they were suffering and we could end their suffering. We came because that is what humans do when someone calls for help." He gestured to the star map that filled the center of the chamber. "There are 100 civilizations represented in this room. How many of you heard the Villani's distress call? How many of you had the power to help them?" He let the question hang. "We are the smallest and youngest species here. We have the least advanced technology and the shortest history. But we were the only ones who answered." No one spoke. No one could meet his eyes. Kira stepped forward. Her voice was soft but clear. "When I sent that message into space, I expected nothing. My people were dying, and I was grasping at straws. I asked monsters for help, because monsters were all we had left." She looked at Admiral Park with tears in her 4 eyes. "But these are not monsters. These are heroes. They crossed the galaxy for us. They bled for us. They died for us. 2,000 of their people gave their lives to save strangers they had never met." She turned back to the council. "The humans have a saying that Admiral Park taught me. They say, no one fights alone. That is their creed. That is their promise. When someone calls for help, they answer." The Morith was silent for a long moment. Then it asked the question that every species in the galaxy wanted to know. "And if others call for help? If other species face extinction, as the Villani did, what then?" Admiral Park smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. "Then we answer," he said. "Every single time. That's the deal we're offering. Join us, work with us. Help us build something better than what came before. And whenever someone needs help, whenever someone is facing the darkness alone, They will never have to face it without us. The chamber erupted in noise. 100 species talking at once, debating, arguing, trying to understand what they had just heard. Some were hopeful. Some were suspicious. Some were afraid. But somewhere in the vastness of space, word was spreading. The humans had arrived. The humans had fought the swarm and won. The humans answered calls for help from strangers. Some civilizations felt hope for the first time in centuries. Others felt fear. And deep in the dark spaces between stars, the scattered remnants of the Drath swarm felt something they had never felt before. They felt like prey. Admiral Park walked out of the council chamber with Ambassador Kira at his side. Behind them, the galaxy was changing. New alliances were being formed. New possibilities were being discussed. A new era was beginning. Do you think they will accept your offer? Kira asked. Park shrugged. Some will. Some won't. It doesn't matter. We'll help either way. Even those who fear you. Especially those who fear us. He looked up at the stars, at the billions of worlds he would never see. Fear is a terrible thing to carry alone. Everyone deserves someone to stand with them in the dark. Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her since the battle. The 2,000 who died. The ships that were destroyed. Was it worth it? Park was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with grief and pride. I don't know, he admitted. I hope so. I have to believe so. Because if their deaths meant nothing, then what's the point of any of it? He turned to face her. But I know this. Those people died fighting for something bigger than themselves. They died protecting strangers who had never done anything for them. They died because they believed that helping others was more important than saving themselves. He smiled sadly. That's the best kind of death I know. And it's the best legacy I can imagine. Kira nodded slowly. She did not fully understand humans yet. Perhaps she never would. But she understood this much. The galaxy had changed forever. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again.